Good evening. Welcome to Monday's session on the 7 factors of awakening. We are at the module of investigating reality or investigation of reality. And today will be the last session of the module and also the last session of the year. So before I touch on new materials, I thought to recap a little bit what we have covered so far in this module on investigation of reality. Let me just start by, most of you probably have heard this before. These 7 factors of awakenings are 7 conditions that are presented in the Buddhist teaching, which are found to be especially conducive when we nurture and bring together these 7 factors. They promote or they bring about, first of all, awakening here is equivalent to the word enlightenment, but it's good to think not as a one-off kind of event. Oh, I'm enlightened and that's the end of it. Life, I live happily ever after. It's better to think of it as a progressive kind of different stages. Of course, each stage is marked by a certain breakthrough in understanding, or I would like to think of it as a profound shift in perspective. It's almost like a new discovery, an insight into our situations that has a transformative effect on us. So this shift in perspective, the first awakening, so to speak, will be in a way the most significant one because it set us apart. It's sort of like previously we have been going in this direction, we see things in this way, we function in this manner. And now having bring together the 7 factors of awakening, it helps to promote and bring about a different perspective. And the very first awakening experience, so to speak, is mark a significant breakthrough. Yeah, even in the Buddhist context. And when that happened, we suddenly awaken to a different possibilities, awaken to a way of life, a way of living and functioning, which is, in the Buddhist teaching, much more conducive to happiness, and most importantly, help us to find freedom from suffering, more importantly, freedom from the pre-existing conditions or causes of our suffering. Yeah. And so these 7 factors together really provide the most conducive conditions to catalyze such a shift or such an awakening, so to speak. So we covered previously the first factor is mindfulness. So cultivating this, our natural quality of mindful attention goes a long way to facilitate this discovery, this shift in perspective. And now we are almost finishing with the second factor of investigation of reality. Factor is a very kind of mental factor. It's actually a very common way in Buddhist teachings to describe all these different functions, almost like a kind of a building block, like that. So divide the different functions of the mind into different blocks, and then you say, oh, okay, there's one block, one quality called mindfulness, another quality called investigation, another quality which is coming next year, we call effort. It's a very unusual way of talking about qualities and function of our mind, of our consciousness, or inner qualities. More often than not in English, we tend not to talk like this. So it's a very kind of typical, a very Buddhist way of analyzing the inner qualities and function. And so it follows a certain model, a certain way of understanding and describing the function of our mind, which includes our thoughts, our emotions, our habits, or the function of our consciousness. Yeah. So the factor of investigation is an unusual quality. It's almost like, I don't actually think of it as a particular singular factor. I think of it as a particular way of using our attention, using our abilities to investigate, to inquire. And of course, the outcome is we get not only first a closer look, but a better look at the reality of situation. So the investigation has the aim of putting us in touch with the facts, to come closer to the facts, to come closer to the factual aspects of. And here, of course, what we are investigating is our experiences, It's very much a very personal thing. It's not, of course, we do investigate external phenomena, the objective world, but more importantly, we are investigating the mechanism and the functioning of our subjective experiences. And what is it? How, from our own side, what we bring to it. How do we influence or affect positively or negatively our experiences? And that's what we investigate. That's what we try to understand, have a clearer understanding and knowledge of it. Yeah. And so in this module, I first start off talking about a bridging between the previous factor and this one, bringing together how mindfulness is closely related to investigation, because we actually apply the quality of mindfulness in the process of investigating. So I start off with that, explaining how the mindfulness, applying mindfulness in itself become part of the process of investigating. So I led a meditation where asking you to be mindful and differentiate between when the way we are using our attention, our mind, is through sensing through our physical senses, and when we are using our mind in terms of thinking. To make this very artificial differentiation of when we are using the energy of our attention in sensing and when we are using it in thinking, and to be able to differentiate these two activity in our own experience. When am I sensing? Which is when my attention is preoccupied with what is going on here and now through my physical senses. And when I'm preoccupied with thinking, of course, thinking could be about anything, could be about what is going on here, but more likely than not, we tend to thinking are preoccupied with the past or with the future, or if you're like me, I love to daydream. It's my habit. Preoccupied with some fantasy, some fantastic universe and happening that is not anywhere close to reality. So sensing and thinking. One is not better than the other. There's just different ways we function and different ways we use energy. But very important to know when we are doing which one. Am I sensing or am I thinking? And if I'm thinking, what happens if I withdraw my attention from thinking and come back to sensing? What difference would that make? And this, on the preliminary initial level, really help us to differentiate. When am I in touch with what's going on here and now? And when am I lost in thoughts, so to speak? Am I really present here in this moment, listening to what this person in front of me is saying, which is sensing, listening? Or I'm just so lost in my thoughts that I'm not really fully listening to the person. I'm more preoccupied with my own thinking. Oh, what should I say next? Why is this person saying this? How dare this person say that to me? Blah, 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 blah. So there's an immediate practical application of differentiating, sensing, and thinking, and allow us to investigate how much are we in touch with reality of this moment, and how much time we are actually caught up in thinking. Could be about the past, could be about the future, or like me, it could be just daydreaming. Yeah. And also in this context, I introduced this idea of retrospective mindfulness or recollection. I mean, retrospective mindfulness is a sort of complicated term. You don't have to call it that way. But there is a place for us after something has happened, not on the spot, to practice mindfulness. How do we be mindful? We bring to mind what we can remember from that incident. We bring that to mind, which a lot of people are already doing, especially when we have something happen to us early on in the day, and we get upset or we get entangled in some reactions, and we look back and we are very curious to find what happened to me, what happened during that particular encounter or interaction. So we automatically practice retrospective mindfulness or recollection. We try to recollect hopefully the facts as close as possible, just the facts. But we tend to intersperse interpretations and we tend to elaborate on it through our fantasy. But if you put that aside, we simply recollect what happened, what was I thinking, what was I feeling, what was the other person doing, how am I reacting to it. And just by doing that in itself, it's a kind of mindfulness. Of course, it's about what has already happened earlier on. But due to the gap, the distancing in time, we are less reactive, right? So we much more likely able to just notice the fact, notice what actually happened, instead of re-triggering our reaction. Now, this is a very useful function of mindfulness in the in applying it to investigation, because precisely because we quite often are caught up in the moment, we are not able to notice or be aware or mindful on the spot. And therefore, we might have to do it with a time lag. We have to do it subsequent to it. Subsequent to that, we can look back and we can then investigate what happened to me. What was being triggered in me? Why is this particular reaction? Why am I triggered so strongly? We can ask those questions and we can investigate. Right? So that is what we start off this module with, bridging between mindfulness and investigation. Then, having talked about this particular technique of using mindfulness in the service of investigation, I highlighted a few characteristics that will be has been recommended in the Buddhist teaching for us to investigate, precisely because these are the characteristics we have a tendency, unconsciously, not consciously, but quite often unconscious or subconsciously, we tend to hold on to misconception. We always have some misunderstanding or misperception in relation to them. These are characteristics of impermanence. We have a tendency to misperceive or misconceive and hold things to be more permanent than they are. Things change, and we are quite often not so willing to acknowledge change, even though we know intellectually, but emotionally we are less willing to admit. We more likely to have all sorts of maneuver to get around it, as if we can somehow, in so doing, deny change. We can't, but we're just not facing up to it. So change, impermanence. The other one is the lack of long-lasting satisfaction in relation to changing conditions, in relation to things and situations that are subject to change. They simply, because they change, they are not possible to supply us with everlasting satisfaction. It's not that they don't bring us pleasure. That's not what we're saying. But precisely because they don't last, they change. So any satisfaction, any pleasure we have, we derive from them or in relation to them, are by nature also impermanent. Right? So, but we tend not to think like this. We tend to, just as we hold things to be fixed and static and permanent, we hold or project or demand that the happiness and satisfaction derived from those objects and conditions must also stay constant or permanent. And this is again another misconception. Holding things to be sources of everlasting satisfaction when they themselves are subject to change. They themselves can't help it but to change. They don't last. Yeah. So this is the second one, of no lasting satisfaction. The third one is the more complicated characteristics of selflessness or also emptiness, depending on, they have, although the words are different, they do point to a similar understanding. Yeah. The lack of unchanging self, the empty of some kind of inherent independent essence. These two phrases, you can in a way understand them the same way. There's just different words for it. And this is one that is difficult to explain, but very important, also an important characteristic, because we have an instinctive grasping at the self, grasping at unchanging essence. In fact, this is how, and this is considered ignorance in Buddhism. We are ignorant in the sense that not because we don't know, but we know things in a wrong way. We have a tendency, very pervasive tendency for all of us, to project and hold things to have some kind of unchanging core or essence. A good person must always be a good person because they have the essence of goodness, and therefore they mustn't change. And a bad person has the essence of bad person, and they must stay a bad person. Otherwise, you mess up my universe. In my universe, good person stay good and bad person stay bad. Then I It's easy. I know how to relate to a good person, and I know how to relate to a bad person, and life is piece of cake. I don't have to think too much. I don't have to pay too much attention. I just react. But unfortunately or fortunately, this is not reality. No, reality is no one has an absolute essence of goodness and an absolute unchanging essence of badness. In fact, we are far more complicated creatures. So under certain sets of conditions, under certain contexts, maybe the goodness within us express itself. Wonderful. Under a different set of circumstances, the not so good aspect of ourselves manifests. So we are much more fluid, much more dependent, much more changeable. We don't have an unchanging core or essence. And therefore, this polarizing way of looking at ourselves, looking at the world and the people, the situation, although it's very simple, it's inaccurate. It is not able to face up to the changing reality, changing conditions. And which is a pity, because of course this dividing the world into white and black, dividing what sometimes called all or nothing kind of thinking. You're either all good or you don't have any good at all. You're either all bad or you can't have any little bit of badness. It's a kind of oversimplification, and it's not true. That's no reality. If we follow it, of course, on one hand, we feel very secure, which is really, I think, one of the main reasons why we succumb to it. It gives us a great sense of very comforting, great sense of security. I know my place in the world. I know who is in the good side and who is the bad side, and that's it. I don't have to look again, and I don't want it to be in doubt. I just have to shoot. I just shoot the bad guys and stay with the good guy, and that's the end of the whole thing. But unfortunately, that's not reality. Reality is much more fluid, dependent, interdependent, even worse, interdependent. All these interactions of changing conditions brings out different aspects of ourselves, bring forward different behavior, and we have to stay in touch with the changing conditions in order to come forth with the better response to each one of them. And we don't like it because it's full of uncertainty, full of unknown. It feels very insecure to succumb to follow this view. Gone is all the old certainty, old sense of comfort, the old kind of, it's very fixed, very rigid, but it's comforting. So we trade in old rigidity because they don't work. And in turn, we are confronted with insecurity, with the reality of change. Okay. So this is another quality, selflessness and emptiness. And the last quality, which I mentioned previously, is related to all of them, is of course the fact of dependent origination or conditionality, that things don't exist in and of themselves as good or bad. But whatever it is, whatever condition, however they manifest, depends on conditions, changing conditions. Certain sets of conditions gathered, or we see a certain effect emerge. And different sets of conditions, a different effect emerge from it. So everything is dependent on conditions. And to think in terms of conditions. Under certain sets of conditions, I'm happy, I manifest the look, the expression, and the behavior of a happy person. Wonderful. Circumstances change, conditions change, a different gathering of conditions. I'm unhappy. I manifest unhappiness. I behave as an unhappy person. If I'm in touch with those conditions and I can work with them, then I can also shift myself from unhappiness to happiness and prevent myself from falling back into unhappiness by working with the conditions. Right? So these are the 4 characteristics that I've covered in this module so far. And today, the final session, we're going to talk about an important topic which will lead us on to the next factor next year, the factor of effort. So if you were to summarize all this investigation, then what we want to do is to conclude and draw up for ourselves sort of a working plan, what's practical and effective. What sort of conditions should I nurture, should I give energy to and promote? Because these sets of conditions are conducive to happiness, not just for myself, even happiness of others, the people around me. And what sort of conditions, would have the opposite effect? They destroy my happiness. They increase suffering. They promote suffering. Not only my own suffering, but also suffering of others. So, and in Buddhism, we call them those that are conducive to happiness. We call them wholesome factors, wholesome condition, or virtuous. Yeah, and the other group will be the unwholesome or the non-virtuous. Yeah? And so, investigation, of course, is then to the final aspect of investigation I want to touch on today is investigate and identify which are the wholesome conditions and which are the unwholesome conditions. And this can be what is happening inside or what is outside. Yeah, they're just different situations, conditions that we highlight to ourselves. And then, of course, this gives us a guideline as to where we put our energy and effort, which is what's coming, the next factor. We nurture what is wholesome, what is virtuous and conducive to general happiness, my own happiness, others' happiness, well-being, and so on. And we diminish the impact. We weaken those conditions that are unwholesome, that leads to suffering, pain, sorrow, disappointment, or whatever unpleasant experiences. We want to diminish that. So it's a very understandable way, and we take to it naturally because that's really what we are doing. Maybe not so consciously, but subconsciously, that is the scheme we are following. We try to maximize what we think will bring happiness to ourselves. We try to diminish what will bring suffering to ourselves. And this is just making explicit what we do naturally anyway, in an instinctive way. Now, the main challenge is which are the wholesome conditions and which are the unwholesome conditions. And so often in the Buddhist teaching, let's take an example, anger, right? In Buddhism, anger tends to be classified as unwholesome qualities, unwholesome factor. But down the ages, there are objection to it. And one common objection people feel is that under certain contexts, maybe anger is wholesome. One common reasoning goes is anger helps a lot of us to mobilize energy, help us to stand up for ourselves, stand up against injustice, stand up against misconduct of others. It is precisely through being angry that we find that source of energy within that allow us to break through all the inhibitions, to break through all our inertia, to bring about, to act in such a way to put an end to those misconduct or to whatever it is harmful behavior of others. There's a very common reason, and I myself appreciate that because I'm quite often like this. I'm one of those people who may more likely to be complacent, and might likely to give in until, of course, I get really pissed off, and under the influence of anger, I will probably say things that I normally wouldn't say. I will act in ways I normally wouldn't do. And of course, quite often they are inappropriate and they make things more complicated. But then there are also many occasions I find that something positive come out of venting my anger, acting under the influence of anger, which I can't deny, because those are conditions where it's because I'm angry. That's why I speak up. I give voice to something that I might previously kept to myself. And regardless of the anger itself, what I say, there are some relevance to what I brought up or what I try to put across. Although I have to say, anger really makes communication much harder because people tend to react to the aggression as opposed to the fact that I'm trying to put forward. And so this is a very common thing that we, and I think it's relevant for us to think about it, and not just accept what is stated in some religious teaching, like even Buddhism, that says, "Oh, anger is bad, we need to abandon anger." I think it's much more helpful for us to take it with a pinch of salt and say, "Oh, let me investigate. No, let me just, in my own experience, based on my own thinking, let me take another look. Is it true or is it not true? No, is anger truly negative and harmful? Is there any redeeming qualities or to anger? Where do I stand? What is my current conclusion about it?" It's something good to investigate for ourselves, because it is, after all, it's a journey of understanding. Going from one particular view to another, from one particular perspective, to uncover other possible perspective on this, on a particular situation. So here I want to offer a way of looking at and help us to differentiate what is wholesome, what is unwholesome. And this, of course, relate back to why we call it investigation. We are not just it's not just trading different arguments. Oh, I argue anger is bad, and then I have another argument, anger is good, and it's just about all these different possible arguments, different way of, which are helpful, help us to think deeper about each of those issues. But more importantly, in the Buddhist context, we also define what is wholesome conditions, wholesome factors, as those that are rooted or based on a valid foundation, on something that is valid and true. In other words, are in accord with reality. And unwholesome conditions or non-virtuous conditions are rooted in ignorance. That means are rooted in a distorted understanding and rooted in misunderstanding of reality, or misreading of reality, a misunderstanding of reality. So one is rooted in reality, and one is rooted in non-reality, something fictitious or wrong. Right? So this is one of the criteria for gauging what is wholesome and what is unwholesome, which is, and other people, other contexts will have different criteria. And one very common criteria is whether it feels pleasant, lead to pleasant feelings or unpleasant feelings. Yeah. So feelings quite often in a lot of cases becomes the final criterion. If it brings me pleasant feeling, it must be good. It feels nice. It brings on unpleasant feeling or discomfort, it cannot be good. And of course, even without talking about religious contexts, even in a totally secular setting, we also a bit doubtful of this particular criteria based on feelings. Because first of all, feelings change. Now, what used to make me feel good now make me feel not so good. Is it still good then? Is it still wholesome? And also sometimes things might feel unpleasant or leads to unpleasant feeling, but actually it's good for us. So this criteria that is based solely on how we feel may not be so appropriate or suitable. So in the Buddhist context, then I'm saying that the criterion ultimately is whether it is in accord with reality or is out of touch with reality, is in accord with some distorted understanding of reality. Because this is easy on paper in theory, but in real life it's really hard to verify for ourselves. But still, it's one way of looking at it. And in other words, if I were to investigate and find that, based on what I've covered previously, if that is a wholesome quality, if it's rooted in the understanding of impermanence, understanding that there is no lasting satisfaction to be found in relation to impermanent things, impermanence, and such things are necessarily empty or selfless. They lack any kind of unchanging essence or core or self, and that they are all dependently originated. They're all dependent on conditions. Now, if the wholesome conditions or factor I investigate is rooted in this four or share in this four and are based on these four characteristics, then based on the Buddhist presentation, there is a higher chance, more likely than not, this conditions or factor is in accord with reality. It is in accord with reality, it would more likely than not promote happiness, and therefore it is classified as wholesome. Whereas on the other hand, if I find a factor or conditions which is rooted in understanding of viewing things as permanent, unchanging, or project lasting happiness, or project the idea of, or this is the source of everlasting happiness on an impermanent object, yeah, or hold a view. This is a very kind of typical way in Buddhism we say a wrong view, where we hold that there is an unchanging core or essence to a self, a person, or different objects. Like what I give the example, there's unchanging essence of goodness or unchanging essence of badness in different people. Then it's more likely than not it is a distortion, a distorted view, and more likely than not it will be an unwholesome factor. And lastly, if we deny or is not able to accommodate an understanding of conditionality, dependent origination, it somehow doesn't sit well with that, then more likely than not, from a Buddhist perspective, it is rooted in a misunderstanding, in ignorance, and therefore it will be an unwholesome quality. Okay, so that is investigation boiled down to really identifying, primarily within ourselves, within our own inner experiences, the various factors and various views and qualities, various states of mind, that whether they are wholesome or unwholesome. Because then it lends us to act practically, to promote and nurture the wholesome one, and to diminish, to reduce, and eventually to eliminate the impact of unwholesome qualities and conditions. Okay, so that I hope, at least theoretically, that concludes the ideas I want to present it under investigation. So it all boils down to investigating and identifying wholesome and unwholesome factors within oneself, and nurture the wholesome one and diminish, even to abandon that unwholesome one. Next, I want to talk about the practical aspect of putting this into practice, and some of my own misadventures to share with you, and then we will do some meditation. Right? In the teaching, in Tibetan Buddhist teaching, there is a story, a teaching story that they sometimes roll it out. The story sounds very simple, but there are some complications if we look deeper into it. It goes to say that in the past there is this, I forgot the name of this great Tibetan practitioner, and this practitioner embodied this factor of investigation. What he would do is, at the end of the day, he will look back at the day's happenings and his own activity, and then for any actions or behavior, or even, I'm not sure whether even maybe thoughts or intentions that are wholesome, he would put a white stone. So basically he's doing accounting at the end of the day. He's counting how many wholesome actions or wholesome thoughts, maybe not like every individual thoughts, but like wholesome episodes, that he have created in the day. So he put, he must have a huge stack of white and black stones, and so he would, for each of the wholesome act, mental act or physical or verbal act he created that day, he counted the whites. And then, of course, the unwholesome ones, if he succumb to unwholesome habits, or he act out of it, or he dwell on it, then he put the black stone. Now, of course, as the story goes, when you first start, he has a huge stack of black stone and very few white, day after day after day. And this becomes impetus for him to practice harder, to work on, of course, reducing the stack of the black and increasing the stack of the white. And so as the story goes, the progress comes when the black, day after day, the black is getting smaller and smaller, and the white power is getting higher and higher, until eventually, of course, as all this thing has good ending, he only have white, and only very rarely will have one or two black stones, or maybe none. I don't know. I can't remember, but that's the idea. How he practiced, investigating, creating, the conditions, the conducive conditions, gathering all these wholesome qualities and abandoning the unwholesome qualities. Yeah. So that sounds simple. We just have to emulate this great practitioner and voila, we will arrive. Unfortunately, life tends to be much more complicated than a teaching story, So many years ago, when I was studying Buddhist philosophy in a 7-year course, a master program on Buddhist philosophy in Italy. So I went over to Italy from Singapore, and we studied this, in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, in a private kind of Buddhist institute, Instituto Lama Tsongkhapa, that's what it's called. And midway into the course, we are the first batch, so it's quite a lot of experiment. We're like the guinea pigs. There's a lot of experimental conditions, and they're trying out different ideas. And one of those ideas that they try out that persists for whenever it's implemented until the end of the course is we are supposed to do an anger reporting card. We have to report the incidents of anger, episode where we got angry over the week. So month after month, we have this little form, like 4 weeks or how many weeks in the month, and every week we write in a number, how many times we got angry during the week, and then we submit this, and the coordinator will tabulate. And there is, worst of all, a pass and fail. Like I can't remember. There's a certain numbers for 1 month. If you exceed that number, then you fail the month. You get less number of anger episodes during the month, then you pass. And that is also, in fact, affect our graduation. If you fail in these conditions, you get too many episodes of anger. It's almost like indication you didn't practice very well, and therefore you fail the course because you failed this practical aspect of it. It sounds straightforward, isn't it? Well, I just have to don't get angry so often, and then my reporting will get less and less, and then eventually I will be a saint at the end of the course or whatever. But life is unfortunately so much complicated. One of the funny feature is a lot of us give hand in, now return, 0 week after week, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. I'm not saying that anybody's fault, right? Because when people ask, so what is this anger? How angry must I be in order to count as 1? Which is a difficult question to answer, isn't it? There's so many ways in which we get angry, and it differ from one person to another. And so the instruction come back is to define anger as the intention to harm. So whenever we have the intention to harm, then that is counted as being angry, and then that is counted as we should count that episode in. And this is, on hindsight, I personally think it's a kind of a dodgy definition. Not that there's anything wrong with it, no. That's how in the literature, that's how it's stated. But in practice, it's difficult. Intention to harm. I might get very angry at somebody. I get really upset. But I may not explicitly, it's like, I'm not one of those people. Because my anger tends to be very intense. I have murderous rage, which clearly is the intention to harm. After all, I wanted to murder them, right? So I have no excuse. So I will have some numbers because I tend to get very angry of that sort. Yeah. Other people's anger will express differently, and it's understandable if they look at their anger or when they're angry, and they don't find this, they don't find that intention to harm, so they don't count it. They're angry, but they don't have that they don't meet the criteria specified in our course. So that's why you have now returned, weeks after weeks, month after month, year after year, which for me means that this method, first of all, is in this case is not effective. It's not that there's anything wrong, but it's not effective because if you define it this way, and if a lot of people send in now return, it doesn't fulfill its function. Its function is to get us to look and identify what we consider unwholesome quality in this context. Yeah, it should have some number there. So the definition should be adjusted a bit, right? Then there are others which interpret it differently and come back with huge number, 100 a week or 150, some ginormous number, which eventually the coordinator had to tell this friend of mine, look, you have to do something. I don't know what you're going to do. You have to do something because at this rate, I have to fail you. And he's not actually a very angry person. And I think what he did is he counted every single thought of anger, which of course is a huge. Within each episode, we would have 100 angry thoughts. I would easily cross that mark. So in the end, he has to change because he's threatened with failure. With this item. So again, that is possible because there is no clear criterion as to like how you put the white stone and the black stone, isn't it? I'm not proud of it. I sit on the fence. I want to be honest, but yet at the same time, I don't really want to fail, right? So, and also I happen to have a challenge. I went through a period where I was really, really angry about certain things in my life. And so I have to figure out a way of, as honest as possible, to report it. And yet at the same time, not report it in the sense that I end up guarantee a fail for myself. So I have a tendency to group my so-called outbursts of anger. Usually it's just within my mind. I wasn't actually saying or doing anything to anybody. I tend to group them into one ginormous episode. And so therefore I would always have some episodes every week, but the number is always low because I group them together, as one ginormous episode. So, and through this exercise, I realized that it is not as simple as putting a white stone and a black stone. There's a lot of things going on. Yeah. All right. So there's another aspect I want to point out is, although the story seems quite simple, but how we respond to this activity is also a great variety and diversity of responses. It's not always helpful, actually. Some people tend to put black stones because that's what they see in themselves. So they have this huge collection of black stones and very few, if none, white stone. Other people only see the good side in themselves. So they have this huge collection of white stones and almost no black stone because they think so highly of themselves. And again, that exercise doesn't work. It's too lopsided in one way or the other. And it tends to reinforce established self-image of oneself. In either way, it's not a helpful thing. So even the act of investigation in this case carries all these complications. And if you're done it unskillfully, it actually can be damaging. Like in that the second example I gave, it reinforces established self-image, which is not helpful if you have a more narcissistic tendency or more egocentric tendency. You tend to see yourself as good. Doing this exercise doesn't do anything to that egocentric quality. It just reinforces it because all you pick up is what you consider to be white stones in your life, and you end up reinforcing that image. And likewise, if you struggle a lot with self-image, a sense of worthiness, you may have a tendency to be harsh on yourself, to beat yourself up. Of course, then your tendency to see everything, all your black stones becomes ginormous, and you tend to dismiss or undervalue or underestimate your own good qualities or good actions. And so exercise ends up reinforcing a negative self-image, which is also not true, actually. So a simple exercise like this, through my own experience, it taught me something. No matter how you word the exercise, in this case, anger reporting, no amount of wording or definition or even the setup of the exercise itself can guarantee that the exercise works in the way you intended it to. Because we bring different things to it. We interpret the rules, we interpret the instructions, and there's no way you can unless you write a huge, ginormous document, all the terms and conditions and different things, you just cannot somehow bypass all the prejudice and biases that we naturally bring to it. So the practice requires a great sensitivities to and a great kind of a sense of creativity also, how we can make it work in a positive way. How can we investigate in a way that is effective in bringing about positive changes instead of reinforcing old habits or worse still, traumatizing ourselves in the process. This anger reporting caused a lot of anger in itself. Yeah. And also, looking back, I think I did this anger reporting. I think we did it 5 years or not, somewhere around there. I'm not sure it actually fulfilled its purpose. At least not for me. I don't think it did anything at all. All it did is make me think, how can I pass and not fail? It does not actually help me to look closer at my own anger, which I did on other occasions. Not because of the anger reporting card, but precisely because I was suffering so much from my own anger. I have no other choice but to investigate it and look a bit closer at why am I so angry? Where is this rage coming from? How can I deal with it more effectively? Yeah. So this whole long, ginormous story I told is just to highlight to you that investigating what is wholesome and what is unwholesome is not as simple a matter as it may sound, because there are it tie in with other things, our sense of self, our self-image, our established habits, and also the skillfulness of how we go about carrying out the investigation. Okay, so I think that is more my precautionary things I want to say about this. But nonetheless, it's still very helpful in our daily life, in our practice, to take up this challenge of investigating and finding out for ourselves what are some of our wholesome habits that we can nurture, and what are some of our unwholesome habits or qualities or factors that we really need to work on diminishing their negative impact on ourselves. So let me give you one example, which is the meditation we're going to do. And this is the meditation on forgiveness. Because I think it's not enough to just pick up all those black stones, so to speak, or highlight all these negative things of ourselves. How then am I going to relate to this fact, this discovery? Am I just going to feel bad about myself and feel guilty and feel so regretful and guilt and laden with guilt? That's not helpful. That's like beating myself up. And that doesn't lead necessarily to positive change, investigating this way. So not only do we investigate, but we also must have a way of responding to what we find that is helpful and that actually fosters some kind of positive, wholesome response from within ourselves. How do we relate to what we see, as we look closer at ourselves, at our own behavior? So forgiveness is a good meditation to present, to frame this point that I want to make. In forgiveness meditation, at least the way I do it, which I learned from others, of course, it's not original to me. We repeat 3 sets of phrases, which cover 3 conditions, and the phrases also, in turns, help me to bring to mind. So, for example, the first set is: if I have hurt or harmed anyone, knowingly or unknowingly, I ask for their forgiveness. Please forgive me. Please forgive me, excuse me. So I would say this phrase to myself: if I have harmed or hurt anyone intentionally or knowingly or unknowingly, intentionally or unintentionally, it's up to you to choose the words. I ask for their forgiveness. Please forgive me. Now, I don't know what exactly I'm asking for forgiveness for. I don't have, when I say the words, I don't necessarily have anything in mind. And that's how I usually meditate. I say the phrase, and then I pause and see what has been triggered. Did it pull something up? No. I don't necessarily do it like what the story goes day by day, but I do it, when I do forgiveness meditation, and I welcome into my awareness any kind of incident or any actions, recent or distant, and retrospective mindfulness, as I was saying, welcome them to come back. Then I might, and I do it in such a randomized way because sometimes things that I don't normally notice may pop into my mind, and I say, "Oh yeah, there, right. I wasn't behaving very nicely at that particular occasion." Yeah, and that come back to me, and I can review it, I can recollect it, and I turn it around and see, yeah, I did behave very badly. I was thinking like this, I was feeling like this, and then I act in this way. Now with hindsight, I can see, not so good. I might be been hurtful, I might be harming others, or at least I'm not really living up to my own ethical principles. I'll say yes, and then in relation to that, if I've hurt or harmed anyone, knowingly or unknowingly, I ask for forgiveness. Please forgive me. So in relation to that, at least in my mind, I say, please forgive me. I'm sorry. Okay, and I just do it over a period of time, over a period you will in a meditation for a certain period of time, just allowing this to come. This is my way of counting black stones, but framed within the framework of forgiveness, and to. Could it be they are doing based on their standards, not those taught by Buddha? Not so clear the question. Who are the they? Could it be they are doing based on their standards? Everybody do things based on their own standard. I do things based on my own standards, not those taught by the Buddha. And why is it that those taught by Buddha are necessarily the right ones? Have you investigated? Someone come along and tell you, oh, this is what the Buddha taught. Is it true? Maybe it's not. No. This day on Facebook, all this picture, the Buddha said blah blah blah. The Buddha said blah blah blah. Most of it, I'm quite sure the Buddha never said anything like that. What is the standard of the Buddha? No. So regardless of whose standard it is, we have to investigate again. And even the Buddha, what we learn in the teaching from our Lama, we also must investigate. Because why? Otherwise, we are just swallowing someone else's words, and we may not digest them. We probably have to see. We can use that as a reference. It's a good place to start. Like the teaching said, anger is bad. All right, I give it the benefit of doubt, but I want to investigate. Is it true? Am I able to verify in my own experience? And then that's where the investigation come in. Like for example, I recollect, I got angry, I behave in this way, and I can see for myself, first of all, I hurt myself. The anger in itself is hurtful of myself, and also I hurt others, or I'm more likely than not. I find that the anger get in the way of effective communications. It tends to make me overreact. I don't think clearly under the influence of anger. And on hindsight, I think I could have behaved better. I could have done things differently and more effectively. I could have bring about change, positive change, without causing so much hurt or damage. So that's how I conclude that quite often my anger, I'm not saying my anger is not justified, but I'm saying my anger is not necessarily the most helpful thing. It might reveal something for me, and which is wonderful. It shows me something that I might be in denial or I'm not aware of. But I don't find anger such a helpful thing, actually, because first of all, in itself, it's a very disturbed state of mind. And often when I act out of my anger, I'm also not very effective. I tend to overdo things. I tend to overreact. I tend to, I definitely don't think very clearly under the influence of anger. So then I have my own side of the story, and I verified for myself with the guidance of the teaching, but I verified for myself. Yeah, I don't think my anger is so helpful. And that's what I recommend people to do. A lot of time we don't do it. I myself, when I first new to Buddhism, I swallow a lot of things. I don't digest them. Years later, I have to go back and look at them all over again, because what I swallow and undigest stay undigested. They are not assimilated. Instead, they just wait. They just sort of sit there, like food, like undigested, just sit there, and there's no nutrients coming out from them. They don't nurture me or nourish anything because they are not digested. They're just like iron ball, just sit there. It's a burden to try to live up to it, and yet at the same time, because I have not assimilated them, I have not worked with it. So therefore, it's important, regardless of whose standard it is, even my own standards, whatever standard I have come up with, or could be the Buddha standard, we need to investigate. Are they wholesome? Are they in accord with reality? Or are they unwholesome and not in accord with reality? And most of the time, this is the step we miss out. We are so willing to accept what someone else said as right. We are so willing to submit ourselves to established system of good and bad, right and wrong, that we didn't actually investigate them closely for ourselves, for our own benefit, not necessarily for someone else. And so then later, years later, we suffer from indigestion. We suffer from conflict that refuses to go away because something from what we have received and accept and what is coming up from within ourselves, we can't assimilate them. They don't integrate. And so they have this a serious case of indigestion. Yeah. And so we have to relook at that, relook at my view and the view I receive from others, and I have to somehow resolve this conflict, and I have to look closely again at one's own experiences. And that's what this whole practice is about: investigation. Investigate for ourselves in terms of our own experience. In a famous discourse by the Buddha, preserved in Pali, the Kalama Sutta is a very famous sutta. A lot of people quote it for various reasons. The Buddha approached by a group of people from the village of Kalamas. They are not Buddhists, but they are, I don't know where they are, but it seems that a lot of different spiritual teachers passed through their village or town or whatever. And different teachers gave their own view of spiritual practice, including the Buddha, of course. And so they are a bit confused. Who is right? Who is wrong? What is the one? Which one should I follow? And so they approached the Buddha with this question. And the Buddha said, well, he didn't say, no, mine is the right one. Just follow me and forget about the others. He said, look, don't rely on teaching based on various other reasons. I can't remember all of them. One of them is don't rely on the teaching just because you say, oh, this person is my guru. Therefore, whatever he said must be correct. Don't rely on the teaching because it claims to have a long tradition. Many things have a long tradition. Doesn't mean that they have been around for a long time. It means that they're necessarily right or good. Don't base on it based on logical reasoning. This is a very interesting one. Someone may argue logically, and it may sound all logical and rational, right? But the problem is there are different ways of reasoning things, right? So if you just base on logical reasoning alone, it's often not enough. Yeah. I do a lot of scientific, when in my previous life, when I was doing research in chemistry, we do a research based on some logical reasoning. But we have to experiment. And the result of the experiment reveal to us, my logical reasoning, is it in accord with reality or not? Right? And in my case, the experiment shows that my reasoning is faulty. It's all logical, but it's faulty. Because why? That's not how reality turned out to be. So what must I change? I must change my logical reasoning to accord with what I find from my experiments. So logical reasoning alone does not necessarily determine the reason is because logical reasoning depends on premises. What is a bit like what they say, garbage in, garbage out for computer, which is a logical machine. You put garbage in, of course you come up with garbage. So if I put in premises that are not correct, the logical conclusion that come out of that reasoning cannot be trusted either, because it start off wrong, you will end up wrong also. Yeah. He also said there are various things So there's a big long list he goes through. There are not reliable guide to what is wholesome, what is unwholesome, who I should follow or should not follow. And at the end of it, the Buddha gave his recommendation, two of them. One is from our own experience. I find that following this is conducive to my happiness. It is wholesome. And second, and this also accord with the counsels of those people I regard as wise. So it's not just based on my own experience, it's also based on others, not any other people, but those I regard as wise. And if their counsels match with my own verified experience, then there is a much higher chance that this is the wholesome way. This is the way conducive to happiness. So I don't know whether that answers the question, but this is what is triggered by it. But let's do a meditation on forgiveness. All right. And so the first phrase is, if I have hurt or harmed anyone knowingly or unknowingly, I ask for forgiveness. Please forgive me. So there's a reflection of any wrongdoing on my part. Yeah. Second is, in any way I have hurt or harmed myself, knowingly or unknowingly, I forgive myself. Yeah. Or I offer forgiveness. I forgive myself, which is also very relevant for, especially for those of us who has a tendency to react very negatively to our own mistakes, to beat ourselves up, to really be very critical and negative towards our own failure or mistakes. It's very important also to forgive ourselves for our failings, yeah, and then to pick up the pieces and move on. The last is, if anyone has hurt or harmed me, knowingly or unknowingly, I forgive you. I offer forgiveness. I forgive you. This is a hard one, all right. But nonetheless, it's good to give it a try. Even if you can't sincerely actually forgive, that's all right. We can acknowledge that. We acknowledge we're not ready to forgive. But nonetheless, be aware, become aware by repeating that phrase. Where are the grudges? What are the grudges I still hold? What are the things that still weigh on my heart? The hurt and harm of the past that I'm not ready to forgive. And those and others, maybe I can recollect them. And I'm actually maybe at a place where I say, yeah, I can forgive and I can let go. I can move on. It's not so much forgive and forget. It's forgive so that I can put it aside and I can move on. I can live my life forward instead of being tied to the past. So let's do this meditation as an example of how we can investigate. In this case, focusing more on the unwholesome qualities and unwholesome conditions, and yet at the same time, by investigating and knowing and becoming aware of those unwholesome qualities, we nonetheless try to hold them, try to respond to them in a positive way. In this case, with the practice of forgiveness. Right. So I invite you to join me in a short meditation just to explore this. So first of all, try to find a suitable meditation posture as usual, one that allows us to sit comfortably for the next 20 minutes or so. Most important, of course, is the position of the back and spine. Make sure that our posture does not introduce unnecessary pain or discomfort into the body, especially to the spine. And find a posture in which the body feels supported. Rest the hands and arms on some physical support, so that we can transfer the weight of the arms to that support and we don't have to tense up the muscles of our shoulders or muscles of the arm to hold them up. Feel free to close the eyes completely or leave them open or half open, depending on which one suits you. So while you allow your body to settle into that posture, I'm just going to ring the bell to signal the start of our meditation. Can you all hear me? I hope so. Testing. Yeah. Okay, so so first of all, allow our body some time to get used to the meditation posture and to settle into it. We want to reassure the body in this posture that it is. Oh, my microphone sleep. It doesn't sleep because I'm using. I don't have anything clip. My microphone is on the computer, and I am based on the. Yeah, I think it's working. The input level is still is moving. Yeah, maybe try the volume if you can't hear me. Or wait a bit. I think I'm still transmitting the voice. Yeah. Okay. So take a few moments and we want to help our body and mind to shift gears. Okay, good. Sound is all right. To shift gears and to transition into a meditative state. We can do that by making use of the breath as a support. So I invite you to let into your awareness the sensations of the breath that you can feel within your body. Yeah, my voice dropped when I move into a meditative state. See if you can notice the breath sensations at different parts of your body. Could be at the nostrils. You may sense the movement of the chest, or you may notice the rising and falling movements of the abdomen. Tune into these changing sensations of the breath. Allow yourself to fully experience your own in-breath and out-breath. So attending to your own breath sensations is totally normal for the mind to be distracted elsewhere, for the mind to be caught up in most probably thoughts or sounds or other things. Simply invite our attention to come back here and now and reconnect with the breath sensations. Reconnecting with the breath, noticing the breath sensations. I invite you to focus more on the out breath, the natural out breath. Breathing out in your own mind. Repeat this magic word, release. Each time we come back to the breath, each time we notice an out breath, and as we breathe out, mentally we say the word release. It's a reminder to our own body. Maybe it can release some of the unnecessary tension and tightness in the body. It can let them go, let them flow away with the out breath. A good place to begin actually is with the face. Breathing out, is it possible somehow for us to relax the muscles of the face? So often we tighten the muscles of the face unconsciously, and now is an opportunity as we breathe out to relax our facial muscles, to welcome in a different feeling of softness, of comfort and relaxation into our own face. Breathing out, we can also release the thoughts or concerns that preoccupy our mind, which is also totally normal. Just breathe out and tell yourself you don't have to follow that thoughts. You don't have to complete that train of thoughts. When you notice yourself thinking, you can Let it go. Let it flow away with the breath. Let your attention come back here and now and rest your attention on the breath sensations in the body. Coming back to the breath, it's perfectly normal for us to find ourselves keep doing that again and again. And that is fine. In fact, each time we come back to the breath after we are distracted, and each time we notice an out breath, we offer us the opportunity to deepen the sense of release. Any more physical tension or mental agitation, maybe some of them might just flow away with the out breath. Each time we come back to the breath sensation, we reconnect with the sensations of the breath in our own body. And each time we are consciously aware of the out breath, and we say the word release in our mind. Tell yourself what you are doing is you are progressively deepening the sense of release, both physically and mentally. You're shifting your entire system in that direction, one of settling down here and now and going deeper into your meditation. And this process of deepening the settling down and settling back of both body and mind can continue in the background. As we turn our conscious attention, we put aside the breath and turn it to forgiveness meditation. So feel free to repeat after me in your own mind. You can change the wordings if you like. So the first is to recollect and to ask for forgiveness over our own wrongdoing, harmful, hurtful action we ourselves have created, physically, verbally, or mentally. If I have hurt or harmed anyone, knowingly or unknowingly, I ask for forgiveness. Please forgive me. So I repeat, if I have hurt or harmed anyone, knowingly or unknowingly, I ask for forgiveness. Please forgive me. And the way I do it is I will say the phrase or your version of it, pause for a while, and see what happens, and see whether it triggers any image, any memory. Usually at the beginning it's probably a blank, but as you get used to it, as you get into it, things will come forth. Take a look at them, investigate each incident thoroughly or briefly, entirely up to you, and then respond to each of those recollected incidents with the same phrase. If I've hurt or harmed anyone, knowingly or unknowingly, I ask for forgiveness. Please forgive me. When we do get distracted, not to worry. This is a normal kind of reactions. Come back to the phrase, re-establish your mindfulness, your attention here and now. If I have hurt or harmed anyone knowingly or unknowingly, I ask for forgiveness. Please forgive me. So coming back to the words or the phrases, allow it to trigger and bring to mind different actions, different habits, which might be harmful or hurtful to others. And as we recollect the details, either in a quick or slow way, see if we can acknowledge this aspect of ourselves, acknowledge our choices, acknowledge these actions of ours. And not only do we acknowledge them as unwholesome, but see if we can recognize that these are hurtful and harmful, and see if we can recognize or agree that such actions are not conducive to our own happiness. Instead, they compound our suffering. And if that's true, and if we recognize it that way, then we can sincerely ask for forgiveness. Please forgive me. Coming back to the wordings, if we get distracted, and it's also totally normal if nothing comes to mind. We draw a blank, which is not uncommon, especially if you're new to this meditation. Sometimes the context of the meditation, we just can't remember anything. That is fine. Stay with the wordings slowly, mindfully at your own pace. Just repeat the words and not worry too much about it. If I've hurt or harmed anyone knowingly or unknowingly, I ask for forgiveness. Please forgive me. And then feel free to stay with this one if you like to explore it further. I instead is going to move on to the next one, where I forgive myself for my own failures, for my own hurtful or harmful actions that hurt myself, unwholesome actions, unwholesome qualities that are not conducive to my happiness. Instead, they are conducive to increase suffering for myself. If I have, for all the actions I have done that is hurtful or harmful of myself, I offer forgiveness. I forgive myself. For all the hurt and harm I have done towards myself, knowingly or unknowingly, I offer forgiveness. I forgive myself. And here, under this segment, is the wonderful opportunity to bring to mind anything we feel guilty, we feel bad about ourselves, things that we have done that we somehow trigger the sense of guilt or regret. Why not bring it to mind at this place, at this point of time, and offer forgiveness towards ourselves for being who we are, that we are ordinary human beings, simply trying our best to be happy and to not suffer. And we are not perfect, and that's why we still make mistakes. For all of the ways I have hurt or harmed myself, knowingly or unknowingly, I offer forgiveness. I forgive myself. Coming back to the phrase, do so as often or at your own pace. There's no standard rate. For all of the ways I've hurt or harmed myself, knowingly or unknowingly, I offer forgiveness. I forgive myself. There's a choice between living with guilt and regret and allow those guilt and regret to somehow burden us, hold us back, to limit us, or to acknowledge them and put them down, set ourselves free from them so that we can face the future and carry on. For all of the ways I've hurt or harmed myself, knowingly or unknowingly, I offer forgiveness. I forgive myself. Coming back to the phrase, for all of the ways I've hurt or harmed myself, knowingly or unknowingly, I offer forgiveness. I forgive myself. And this is also the essence of any purification practices that we may do, especially in Tibetan Buddhism. For all of the visualization we do to cleanse ourselves, to purify ourselves, at the very heart of it is really about forgiveness. We forgive ourselves for our mistakes, for our failures, for disappointments, for failing to live up to expectations, for failing to keep to our resolutions, and so on and so forth. Thousands and thousands of failures. And yet at the same time, despite all the guilt and regrets, now is the time to acknowledge them and put them aside and turn our attention to the future. For all of the ways I've hurt or harmed myself, knowingly or unknowingly, I offer forgiveness. I forgive myself. And then we're going to conclude this short meditation. I think that's all the time we have, with a dedication. So having acknowledged maybe the unwholesome aspects, the qualities, the actions we ourselves have created in relation to others or towards ourselves, and we acknowledge them, we work on forgiving ourselves or asking for forgiveness from others. So we create something really positive through this process. Now we dedicate that positive momentum of energy towards the fulfillment of our wishes and aspirations for both ourselves and others. So take a few moments and dedicate in your own way this momentum, this positive momentum that we have created here. We can dedicate that may anything good that come out of this evening's teaching and practice, may this goodness linger with us, stay with us, linger in body, mind, and heart, and help us form new beneficial habits and help us to let go of all unbeneficial habits. And the benefits will stay with us long after the meditation is over. Okay, so that meditation is an illustration of one way we can investigate, in this case, the black stones, the unwholesome aspects of ourselves, but nonetheless, as I want to emphasize, frame or held within the container, the support of forgiveness. That we don't just list out a bit long list of our own failure and then leave it as it is. Instead, we try to find appropriate, helpful response to what we discover through our own investigation, and to be able to nurture that wholesome response towards our own harmful actions or unwholesome qualities. Yeah. And otherwise, we can do something related but different, is to recollect and investigate what are our own wholesome qualities and positive actions. And in that case, we can have it within rejoicing, appreciative joy. And we can really rejoice in our own creation of the conditions of happiness for ourselves and also for others. So with that, I finished the topic of investigation of reality. I hope it is of some help and some interesting ideas I shared that might be helpful to your own investigation of the Buddha's teaching and practice. So this is the last class for Monday, and then we're all going to have a break. So here I take this opportunity to wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and hope to see you again next year. Do check on VI website later on for our new program coming up in 2021, which I really hope will be a much nicer year. So anyway, take good care of yourself, and I'll see you next year. Good night for now.